We used to think that old maps are just curves, sketches, ignorant people who did not swim where necessary. It's not from 1,300th to 1,007 years. 400 years remember this number best cartographers. Europe drew in the center of the North Pole the same land. Huge mainland, 4 islands separated. Rivers in the center of a black rock height with a mountain, called him Terra Septentrionalis. Land north Mercator painted Ortelius painted. Dutch, Spanish are English. 300 cartographers, different eras, different schools, different. Technology, same land on same place, and then in 50 years he disappeared at first, from English cards, then from French to 1,000. 700th year. At the North Pole, suddenly there was nothing, ice, emptiness, and no cartographer in the world has written, "Where did the mainland go that we painted for 4 centuries? No one explained. No one apologized, just erased, and that's what's weird at. We have no single source which would explain where this mainland even came from. Neither expedition nor discoverer. Neither dated appears on the cards immediately ready with. Rivers with mountain names as if someone knew, and then stopped knowing. Duisburg, small German town on Rene 1595th year, February. In the workshop on the second floor of a stone house, smells like linseed oil, and the media is soaked in this smell. All the walls on the outside -10, the windows froze on the inside. Inside sits an elderly man in a black hat. Leaned over the copper plate, he's 82. In a few months he will die, his name is Gerhard. Mercator, he engraving. Map that the world will copy for another 100 years in the center. Cards. Not emptiness in the center of the mainland, 4 huge islands, arranged in a circle like petals between them. Flow 4. Rivers converging to the center, and in the very center a black rock. Mercator signs it in Latin rupa with Nigra et altissima rock, black and highest height 30. 3 French miles is about 100 kilometers. Stop for a second, it draws not. Is crazy. The monk in the basement, it's drawing chief cartographers. Epoch man whose name is still called projection, on which planes fly, and that's what he writes on. The fields of the card literally with his hand ink. Quote, this information I took from books, which is called Inventory of Fortunate Her. Wrote English monk Minaret. From Oxford about 1360s. He traveled myself north and saw this land with my own eyes. The book did exist. Inventio fortunate happy discovery she is referred to. Half a dozen authors of the 15th and the 16th century it is quoted, it is retold. Columbus knew her, he mentioned her in letters, he kept her. In the hands of the Mercator himself, he writes that he took the text from Flemish geographer Jacob Noyen, and now that from what is becoming cold of this book there is not a single copy of not one. Page none. Original sheet, all links to copies. Copies, all copies are lost book, which is 400 years old. Dictated what the top looks like. Peace does not exist in any library of the planet. Contemporaries. Mercator was asked questions by English mathematician John D. The one who was Queen Elizabeth's astrologer. Personally searched the lyrics, dug through the archives. Oxford wrote to Antwerp, begged, bargained. Nothing. One monk told him that he saw the book in the Royal Library. His grandfather died. The book is gone dead end, and everything with mysticism, legend forgotten, but the thing is that on the map of Mercator is not one mainland, there is more. Something if you look closely to the North Shore where today Siberian and Canada coastline coincides with real knot, is perfect, but matches where the Mercators basically do not. Was right to know about her before the opening of the Beringa Strait. Remained 150 years from where he got it. The most bitter thing in this story that Mercator was not a visionary, he was a pedant. He checked coordinates 3 times each. He refused to draw then in what was not sure on his maps and places. Unknown lands, honest Latin terra incognita. Land unknown, but at the pole no incognito on. Pole specific, 4 islands specific. Rivers concrete, mountain 100 kilometers high signed. Numbered with the names of the man who spent his whole life afraid to make a mistake in herself. Important point of the world, drew something that I have never seen and died through 6 months after finishing this engraving calmly. Confidently leaving no explanation, BTW. If you are interested now like me, the truth helps and it costs you nothing. And subscribe next, it will be even weirder and also right. In the comments from which you cities and what is your time of day outside the window now? Just curious who reads it in? Midnight and who is at the morning coffee, because in the next history we will be transferred not to Germany and not to 16th century. We will find ourselves 1,000 years earlier in a monastery where Irish one monk writes in his diary what he saw in Alds. And his record word for word coincides with that through 700 years will draw Merkswar 800, 25th year monastery on the island of Ionu, west coast of Scotland, stone cell. Without window, the only light source is oil lamp, which smokes and smells like fish oil behind the walls. Atlantic. In winter here cheese, so the ink freezes on the feathers. Monk name. Dicuil, he is Irish, he is about 60 and he writes a book called Liber de Mensura. Orbits Terrae, a book about measuring the circle of the earth. Dicuil collects sailors' stories and one story from Irish monks who went far north. He records verbatim quote translation from Latin. 30 years ago our brothers sailed to the island which they believed lay at the very edge. The world at the summer solstice, the sun did not set there. At midnight man could take lice out of his shirt like in the light of day. This is Iceland today, we know exactly Iceland. Irish monks used to get there in leather boats 100 years before the Vikings, but then the Dicuil has more. One entry, and here everything breaks. He writes what's behind it. Island. Even further north in one day's journey the brothers saw the land. Big one with a tall black mountain in the center and water around. That mountain, according to them, went down into the bowels of the earth with the great noise. The monks called the place Tilia Tuli and came back because that scared. Remember 3 details: black mountain, water goes to bowels, 4 streams around. 700 years later Merwer will draw exactly this. Black rock, 4 rivers flowing into the water, which by his signature does not erupt into the bowels of the earth with such force no ship can go back out. Coincidences? Perhaps Mercator could read Dicuil. Manuscripts of the book about measurement walked on European monasteries. Cartographer could take a description and transfer it to the map, but there is a problem. Dicuil not made up. He recorded what the sailors told him. Who were those sailors there? Described a place that does not exist on our maps, and described it in such detail that 700 years later, the other person was able to draw him and him. The drawing matched the description to the smallest detail. That's what it is. Dicuil story. And Mercator, a chain of retellings 700 long years, and at the end of the chain the same black mountain. Here you could calm down and say, well, legend. Stray plot, but in 1577th year happened what the whole version with the legend. Cracking at the seams, English navigator Martin Frobisher came back from the second voyage to the North Seas. He was looking northwest passage way to China through Canada ice. Did not find, but brought a diary, and in the diary a description of the place. North of Baffinland, quoting water translation here. Move with great force to the north and rotate as in a big cauldron, and go as it seemed to me under the ice. Frobisher did not read Dicuil. He was a sailor of war, not a scribe. He did not see the map of Mercator in that edition. Where was the caption? Wires going into the bowels. This edition came out later. He just described what he saw and saw. He whirlpool, huge polar cycle, warm and cold water, which today is called. Thermaline circulation is a real phenomenon. The North Atlantic waters are really sinking in. Area of Greenland, to a depth of 2 to 3 kilometers down, not into the bowels of the earth. Of course, but they drop. That's all the bitter irony. Irish. Monks in the 9th century saw a real ocean. Process described it with language. It's time water goes into the bowels, Dicuil recorded. After 700 years, Merwer put it on the map literally, as a geographical object, as 4 rivers flowing into. Whole, this is not made-up mainland, this is wrong. Understood, observation frozen on the map in the form of sushi, but there is a nuance that is not explained. With this beautiful answer, Dicuil writes about the earth, not about whirlpool earth with mountain. And the monks, according to him, saw her. Did not swim, but saw from a distance a black silhouette on horizon north of Iceland, where today open water and floating ice, and here the very thing begins. Strange, because in 1380s, 200 years before Mercator, 500 years after the Dicuil, 2 Venetian brothers, the names of Jenna sailed north and also saw something. They drew a map on the map island. Between Iceland and Greenland, they named it Frisland. Of this islands today, there is absolutely no reef nor stranded nothing. Atlantic at this place 4 kilometers depths, but the Zinu brothers described him in so much detail with harbors, cities, rivers that European sailors for 200 years seriously looking for Frisland. Equipped expeditions died in the storm. Came back with nothing, and that's the question we have on. Still, no answer that they saw Venetia 558th year house on the canal littered. Papers, 300 years ago on the floor, fragments of letters decayed. To the state of the web at the window sits a man named Nicolet Zenum Jr. He is about 50, he is only. Found in the family archive a pack of letters that its proper grandfather received from his brother 200 years ago. Letters crumble in Nicole's hands, later admits to childhood. I didn't understand their values and messed up most of it. Playing, he literally ripped papers as a kid. And now trying to recover from the remnants he collects. Book and map book called about the sailing of the 2 Dina brothers to the northern seas, according
She's in
to
380s
year Venetian brothers Nicola and Antonio Zeno went north at the invitation of some Prince Zicny of the island government, where then between Scotland and Iceland 12 years they swam the North Atlantic scene, Greenland scene, called Frisland, and another Icaria and lands, which they called Estatal and Andragio somewhere far west map, which is published by Dicuil. Junior falls into the hands of Mercator and Ortelius and everyone. Cartographers of Europe since 1960. Frisland appears on every second map of the world. Big island between Iceland and Scotland with cities with names. With coastline 200 years, Frisland looking for 200 years, she is not found by an English pirate. Francis Drake searched, Martin Frobisher searched, and in 1578 in his journal recorded that he landed on Frisland. Though actually how we now understand he landed on the southern ends of Greenland. Just the map said Frisland and he believed the map and not eyes. That's what the wild power of cartography of that time, if on card printed, means there is a sailor can stand on shore, see Greenland and think, what is this Frisland? Because the map is more important than reality. By the way, if you are wondering now and you have read to this places, please like it is true. Helps the channel, and I see who reaches the middle. And also write in the comments, do you believe? Did you that the Zena brothers really see something, or It was a 16th century fake to me very much. Interesting your opinion, because historians argue about this 150 years and still not agreed. And now the most interesting thing. 1835 Danish historian Carl Christian Rafne took the Zen book and checked it against the real geography of the North Atlantic, and found the odd part of the descriptions to be creepily accurate. Description of the Faroe Islands matched description. Icelandic harbors matched the description of Greenlandic coast with the monastery of St. Thomas coincides with a real medieval Norwegian monastery, which in the 16th century in Venice could not know. The monastery was abandoned long before the publication of the book. Its location was restored only in the 19th century. The voice you selected the Younger sitting in Venice in 1558
Please click the upper right corner
to switch to another voice. Details that could not be invented, they could be. Only record from words, man. According to Raffin and later historians, Zen brothers in 1380s really went north, but not 12 years and not so far. They visited the Faroe Islands. Faroes in Italian of that time sounded like Frisland. Frisland by Nicolam Jr. 200 years later. Recovery. Ripped letters wrongly put the pieces together. Description of the Faroe he took as a description of a separate large island and painted. It's like a separate island, huge, the size of Iceland. That's the whole Frisland reading mistake, gluing mistake. One person mistake, who as a child played with letters and tore them, but Mercator did not know this, and for 200 years no one knew. 200 years. Frisland lived on maps for 200 years in search of people. Cartographers died in the North Atlantic for 200 years, were texting her at each other, adding own details. One painted river, other port, third city. In Iceland grew up on paper, eating unreality about other people's copies of themselves, and that's the bitter irony from which you want to cover your face. Hands, when at the beginning of the 18th century's Frisland finally began to be washed with. No one wrote the cards. Why was there no solemn announcement, gentlemen? We wrong 200 years, sorry, her just quietly removed first from one card, then from another. 2,750 years it is almost gone to 1,800th. She disappears completely as if she was not also. As Terra Century analysis as well as Black Mountain also. Like rivers flowing in the bowels of the cartography of the 17th, 18th centuries spent the great silent purge. She did not explain, did not repent, did not commented. She just washed everything that was impossible. Confirm, and along with phantoms may have erased that. Then something else that was but not fit into a new, rational, measured picture of the world. Because there is another one. Mainland on old maps, and it's the scariest of all about. It was not written by monks. Not Venetians, not Mercator about it, wrote the ancient Greeks, and description of this mainland matches with what was discovered only in the 20th century Podoled. Constantinople, 1513th. Year palace office of Sultan, narrow window room, taken by a grate on the table, parchment from the skin of a gazelle, scraped to transparency over parchment bent. The man in the green turban, he is the admiral of the Turkish fleet. Order of the Sultan. Chop off the head for military failures, but now in 1513 he draws a map of the world from it before us. Only a fragment reached a third of the original, found by accident. In 1929 in the library, Palace Topcopy employee came across sorting out old paper on the map, coast of Africa, coast of South America, and the bottom is long. Coastline stretching from east to west without ice, with rivers, with mountains. This is Antarctica more precisely. This is the land of the Queen Maud, northern coast of Antarctica facing Africa, that part of it, which today, covered with a layer of ice 1.5 kilometers thick, Antarctica as a continent will officially open in 1820th year through 300 years after Piri Flight painted her. The coastline is mapped long only in 1949 with the help of echolocation of the Swedish-British-Norwegian expedition. When they compared the echolocation data with the map of the Piri voyage, the coastline coincided. Not perfect, but so much so that American cartographer Arlington Mallory, who made this comparison, dropped a smoking pipe. This documented scene in 1965th year, Professor Charles Hapgood of King's College in New Hampshire published book. He assembled a team of his students and they 3 years checked the map of the Piri flight with modern data. Conclusion on the map shows rivers and mountain ranges, lands of the Fashion Queen that are today buried under. How could a Turkish admiral know that? 513-year Hapgood could not answer the flight itself on the margins of his map. He loved doing captions on fields, as Mercator writes the following translation from Turkish. This map is compiled by me from 20 old cards and 8 mappamundi. One of the cards belonged to Hans Columba. Other times, Alexander of Macedon, 4th century BC. Stop for a second. Turkish admiral in 1513 claims that he has on the table lies a map 1,800 years old, and this map mainland, which Europe will officially open in another 300 years. And who at that time in 1513th already probably was away as well as today. What about? This to do is a careful answer. Hapgood exaggerated. Coastline matches aren't as accurate as him. It seemed that he mistook for Antarctica at the very a distorted image of the coast of South America, curved to the east, due to the features of the projection which Piri used. Flight part of the researchers and today believes this is how it is, and it is possible. True possible. But there is a problem. The Piri flight card is not the only one. In 1531st year, French cartographer Aaron Zuffinius printing a map world on it below a separate round continent the size of Australia, with rivers flowing from center to coast without ice. Phineas signs his Terra Australia Recenter inventory set. Non dum captivity cognita Earth, southern, recently discovered but not yet fully explored. Recently opened at 1531st year, 290 years before. Official discovery of Antarctica and more map of the Philippines. Boichet, French cartographer. 737th year, he draws Antarctica not solid mainland, a 2 large islands separated by a strait going through the whole land under the ice as we know today Antarctica. It is 2 continental array separated by the system depressions that without ice would be a sea strait. This was discovered by Soviet and American geophysicists in 60s of the 20th century. Bosch drew this in 1737. He couldn't see the ice lies there for at least 1 million years here. You can start talking about ancient alien civilizations, and Atlantis is not gonna this too just eat more boring more. Bitter answer, and it sounds about so antique. And medieval cartography knew much more than we think knowledge was going. Millennia Phoenicians, Egyptians, Greeks, Arabs, Chinese. This knowledge was stored in large libraries. Alexandrian library burned down in several receptions. Between the 1st century BC and the 7th century AD, Baghdad House of Wisdom looted by the Mongols in 1258 manuscripts were thrown into a Tiger and River by, according to contemporaries. Ink from ink a few days. Byzantine archives dispersed after the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Every time the knowledge accumulated perished. People who swam farther than we think. Seen more, memorized, recorded, and something crumbs. Scraps. Pieces of parchment survived, resold, copied. Fell into the hands of the Turkish admiral, then the Flemish. cartographer to monk. On the island of Ion, everyone drew what they saw in the scrap. Not understanding the context, not knowing how to connect and hear. Philosophical blow from which it becomes quiet. We used to think that history is stairs. From the bottom of the cave on top, we are with satellites and GPIs. Each generation knows more than previous. Progress, 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 but the cards speak. Other cards say that someone once knew more. US by. At least one specific area knew and lost. And the descendants of this man leafing scraps painted non-existent continents in place of real and real. Continents in place. What is not it concerns you today right now? Because that exactly as well right now somewhere a library is burning. Close's archive dies. The old man who alone remembered. Recipe root name, and in 300 years, our great-grandchildren will be flipping through our Google Maps with the same understatement with which we look at Terra Septime 3 analysis and ask what they saw there in place of this blank spot. Knowledge is not accumulates linearly. It flows like water in a river and sometimes goes into the bowels, earthly with great noise like Irish monks on their black grief. If you have reached this place, thank you. Subscribe not to miss next video.